Hi guys, Ramon here from The Guitar Show. This is the history of Eric Clapton's guitars, part 2. We're going to focus on the guitars from the Cream era. Okay, we're just going to step back a little bit here and just talk about how actually Cream was formed. So on the night of March 1966, Ginger Baker showed up at a Bluesbreaker gig in Oxford, and he asked if he could sit in with the band. After the gig, Ginger asked Eric if he would be interested in getting a band together. Eric was kind of thinking along the same lines that he wanted to get his own project together, and he was actually thinking about using Jack Bruce. Now, Ginger had actually, in fact, fired Jack Bruce from the Graham Bond organisation. So there was a little bit of history between Jack and Ginger was a little bit shocked that Eric wanted to play with Jack. But they eventually overcame their sort of past history, and that's how basically Cream were formed. Okay, so the band made its unofficial debut at the Twisted Wheel on July 29th, 1966. Okay, guys, as we can see from this photo, Eric is actually using a Bigsby-equipped Les Paul. Okay, the common consensus on this actual Les Paul is that it was only used once, and that was at the 6th annual Windsor Jazz and Blues Festival, which you can see here. That was actually 2 nights later, on 31st of July 1966. Eric Clapton has said that he borrowed this Les Paul, and maybe he wanted to buy it, but the person that owned it didn't want to sell it to him. Some people have speculated that it was actually owned by Keith Richards. As we can see here on Thank Your Lucky Stars show on March 21st, 1965, you can see here Keith Richards is playing a Bigsby-equipped Les Paul. If you look closely at some photos, you can see that it's got a few dents and a machine head is sort of bent backwards. So I'm not really sure if this is the actual one that Eric Clapton borrowed. Another contender of the Bigsby-equipped burst could be the one that Mick Taylor is seen playing here at the Starlight Ballroom in Sudbury, England, 1966. It's actually a 1958 Les Paul Standard, which Mick Taylor bought at Selmer's in London in 1966. Whatever the case may be, Clapton only used this guitar for a few concerts. So Cream did 4 concerts around England, including places like Torquay, Edmonton, West Hampstead and London. And then on the 16th of August, they actually hit the Marquee Club. There's some great photos around of the Marquee Club gig by Cream. And what's really interesting is Clapton is playing a 1960s Les Paul Special double cutaway with P90 pickups and a Bigsby tremolo. Okay guys, so the next guitar that Eric Clapton obtained was the guitar that he used all over the album Fresh Cream. He actually got hold of this guitar via Andy Summers. We're actually going to go back a little bit and talk about the Beano burst here, because it was Andy Summers that first brought this guitar to Eric Clapton's attention. So to quote the Police guitarist Andy Summers, "About the time that we shared a stage at the Flamingo, I acquired a new Gibson from a store on Charing Cross Road. When Eric sees me with it, a 59 Les Paul Sunburst, he asks where I bought it. I innocently tell him that they have another one for sale for 80 quid and he could go and get it. Eric gets the other Les Paul and eventually changes the sound of rock guitar forever." So guys, this was a famous Les Paul that was used on the Beano, John Mayall and the Bluesbreakers album, which was stolen when Cream were first rehearsing. Around the time that Cream went into the studio for the Fresh Cream sessions, Eric was looking for another Les Paul, and he recalled that Andy Summers had one. So to quote Andy Summers again, "Knowing that I have the other one, Eric starts calling it and asking me to sell it to him. By this time, I have moved on to the Fender Telecaster, and I also think that there's something wrong with my Les Paul. The back pickup doesn't work or something. He is offering me £200 for it, which is more than twice what I paid for it. The next day, I drop off the Les Paul at Advision in the West End, where Eric's in the middle of recording with Jack and Ginger. I go into the toilet at the side of the reception area, and when I come out, I hear Eric's voice over the PA system, which is inadvertently hooked into the foyer. He is remarking how great the guitar is, just like his old one." Okay guys, so the conundrum is, did Eric actually use what we call the Summers burst on the Fresh Cream sessions? So he received the guitar, but if it had a problem with the back pickup, who's to know if he actually used it there? However, he was actually developing what he called the woman tone, which was using the neck pickup with the volume rolled right off. So maybe that could have been the inception to that idea. Another thing, he also had his 335 guitar from the year that he bought whilst in the Yardbirds, and of course the Bigsby equipped Les Paul that he used on the first couple of gigs, and the Les Paul Special. Interestingly, you can see in this photo from the German TV show Beat Club that he's pulled the PAF covers off of the pickups of the Summers burst. I'm pretty sure that Eric pulled these covers off because he felt that it gave him a more aggressive tone, just as in the Beano burst that he used on the Bluesbreakers album. Another couple of things that are worth mentioning is the lack of a polka dot with the selector switch, also the reflector knobs, which kind of indicate that this was a 1960 Les Paul. Clapton also took off the scratch plate, but in later photos you can see that he's put it back on again. So Clapton stopped really using this guitar around mid-1967, and this could have been due to a headstock break of some kind. Now, it's possible that he actually gave this guitar away or it was stolen. So nothing's really clear about the whereabouts of this guitar now. If you have any information, please leave it in the comments. This is a 1964 Gibson SG Standard, also known as the Fool, and it's probably the most iconic guitar associated with Cream. It first debuted on March 25th, 1967 at the RKO Theatre on 58th Street, Manhattan, New York. The Fool's paint job was actually created by the Fool Collective, which was a brainchild of Marajake Kodja and Simon Postuma. Basically, in early 1967, the Fool Collective were contacted Robert Stigwood, the then manager of the Cream, to work on instruments and costumes for the band in preparation for their US tour. So Kodja and Postuma painted Clapton's Gibson SG, a drum kit for Ginger Baker, and also the Fender Bass 6 for Jack Bruce. Jack Bruce didn't actually like it because they painted the neck and he felt it was very sticky, so he tended only to use it for TV performances. So this was actually not a Les Paul model because Les Paul decided to take his name off these guitars in 1963, so it was just termed an SG model. It had the deluxe vibrato tremolo, and Eric actually used it on the feedback sections of Hey Now Princess in the March Lost sessions, and you can hear it on a few other bootleg recordings, but generally he kept it locked back. And by late 67, the tremolo had been removed altogether. This guitar was actually used up until mid-1968, when by that time Eric had moved on to the Gibson Firebird. So while Cream were on their first mini tour of the US around March 1967, Eric visited Manny's music shop in New York and bought a 59 or 60 Gibson Les Paul Custom 3-pickup model. Cream's next album featured both the 3-pickup Custom and the Fool SG. It was called Disraeli Gears and it was recorded at Atlantic Studios in New York during May 1967. Both the 3-pickup Custom Les Paul and the Fool SG can clearly be seen in photos at that recording session. Apparently, a 12-string was also used on the track Dancing the Night Away. This could have been a Gibson 335 12-string or a Rickenbacker 12-string guitar. This next guitar is quite interesting. On the 7th of May 1967, Cream played the Swan Yardley in Birmingham. And as you can see from this photo here, Clapton is clearly playing some kind of a Dan Electro guitar. I'm not sure if he used this on any other concerts around that time, but it may be the same guitar that turns up later in Blind Faith. Let's talk about that a bit later. Okay, this other guitar is quite interesting and also is linked to Blind Faith, which we'll talk about later. But I'm going to mention it now because it was actually used in 1968, around February time, when Cream took a trip over to Copenhagen, and it was seen in a Danish movie, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the name, but it translates as It Was Saturday Evening. This is quite an interesting guitar. It's basically a 62 Telecaster fitted with a Stratocaster neck, which was a rosewood board, so probably a 60s Stratocaster rosewood neck. So another guitar that we're only going to briefly touch, as we are going to include it in a George Harrison History of Guitars video, which is the Eric Clapton 1957 Gibson Les Paul, which was a red colour, also known as Lucy. Okay, this guitar was purchased at Dan Armstrong's guitar shop in New York. In August 1968, Eric actually gave George the guitar, and then around September 1968, George Harrison invited Eric to the studio to work on the track While My Guitar Gently Weeps with the Beatles at Abbey Road Studios. Clapton was next seen with the 1953 Gold Top on March 29th, 1968, whilst playing the Hunter College in New York City. I've seen some other photos of Clapton playing a 53 Gold Top, so I may include this guitar in a later part of this video series. The next guitar that Clapton bought was a 1963, 64 or 65 Gibson Reverse Firebird 1, and he bought this on April the 13th, 1968. The Firebird basically had one pickup, which was a single mini humbucker in the bridge position. Clapton said of it, "The 335 was a big favourite, and that particular Firebird. I had some great times on that. The single pickup produced a fantastic sound." So just to recap, before the Firebird 1, in 1968 on the US tour, Clapton was touring with the SG and also the black Les Paul Custom as a spare. So basically Eric replaced the SG with the Gibson Reverse Firebird 1. There are reports of concerts around May 1968 where Clapton actually played the Les Paul Custom exclusively. Okay, this is another burst that Clapton obtained, and it's a 1958 Les Paul Standard, also known as a Dark Burst. and it was one of Eric's main touring guitars during the Cream Farewell tour. It was used alongside the Firebird, and you can see it on a few concerts such as the Denver Coliseum on October the 6th and at the Spectrum Philadelphia on November the 1st. It had a serial number of 82453, and I shall quote Eric here. I recognise this as the guitar that I had given to Paul Kossoff while on tour with Blind Faith in 1968 or 1969. I acquired this guitar whilst I was with Cream and used it until I exchanged it with Paul. Virtually before the Wheels of Fire album was released, Cream announced their breakup. They would do one more US tour and a final album. So for this final tour, Eric actually alternated between the Gibson Reverse Firebird 1 and the Gibson Les Paul Darkburst. On their final farewell shows at the Royal Albert Hall in London, he played his red ES 335 and the Firebird 1. Okay guys, that about wraps it up for the Cream era of Eric Clapton's history of guitars. We're going to be back in part 3 with Blind Faith, Derek and the Dominoes and more. So see you then. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And also please leave your comments because they're fantastic. Okay, see you soon. This is Ramon signing out. Take care.